All right, so today we're going to talk about fundamentals of consulting skill sets. Let's get started. Today we will be a shorter lecture, and because the concept is fairly straightforward, for additional detail and script, please refer to chapter 2 to chapter 4. So there are fundamentally four important consultant roles. The textbooks highlight the first three. Consultants often will either act as experts who possess unique knowledge and skill set for a given problem area that clients will desperately need their help on. And when consultants play this role, oftentimes manager will act as purely as a consumer. They often will take a less active role, while consultant would be in the driver's seat and determine what type of methods, what type of data, and that will need to be collected and how to analyze the underlying this information to come up with the best solutions. Oftentimes, when consultants take this role, they will have limited two-way communication simply because managers take a less active role, and while consultant will be making all these important decisions. Second role that consultant could take is to act as a helper. Oftentimes, this role simply means that consultant will serve as an actual pair of hands. So this simply means that managers will take full control of the project. They will determine the direction, the objective of the project, and they will dictate how and what information will be processed in order to identify potential solutions. Managers tend to believe they are more knowledgeable of these problem set areas, yet they will still like to utilize the consultants' human capitals to help them to solve these issues. And third role that consultant may play is collaborators. They will oftentimes this could happen when both managers and consultant are collaborating more intensively. Basically, those two stakeholders will jointly identify solutions by with manager using consultants' specialized knowledge while and providing their insider information. So there are advantage and disadvantage for both all these different roles. The typical disadvantage for collaborative role is that consultant often will spend more time on this type of project because it often involve more in-depth collaboration. There will be a lot of communication with the clients, while in other roles, the amount of effort tend to be less intensive. And finally, the textbook didn't mention about this, but sometimes consultant may act as a political scapegoat that or may be a pawn of the political conflict within the organizations. Sometimes consultant will be brought in to address to highlight certain issues that top management choose to ignore. Good example is I was brought in as a summer intern to work on a project, and they treat me many years ago when I was before I was a PhD student, and they basically treat me as their external consultant. And at that time, I was fairly knowledgeable of human resource practice. And at the end of so I was brought in to conduct a job analysis, right? Job classification study. So I did that. And when I present my final presentations, then that's when I realized, well, I actually was brought in to highlight these issues, which everyone know already, but the top management didn't really acknowledge this. So my presentation was simply a political action to help them to further highlight this issue to the top managers, right? So when that happened, of course, the top managers won't be too happy about that. So this is would be something you may need to be aware of, but you won't be able to find out toward the end. Right. So now let's talk about the goals of a consultant. There are cognitive goal and affective goal. All right. So cognitive goal are fairly straightforward. First, what you really want to do is to establish a collaborative relationship. We know that consulting play different role in the previous slides, but doesn't matter what role you play, you really want to establish a collaborative relationship because all these consulting problems would be somewhat different and unique. You really need insider information to gain a better understanding of the situation. Furthermore, you will need insiders support, managers support, top manager or middle managers support in terms of the how the information are gathered and uh, analyzed. That's why overall, by establishing a collaborative relationship would help a long way. All right. So second cognitive goal is to solve problems so they remain solved, right? That's fairly intuitive. A consultant was often brought in to address difficult problems. If you are unable to resolve these issues and prevent future occurrence, then you're not really doing your job. So that's why an important goal for a consultant is to solve the problems. And furthermore, the third cognitive goal is to ensure attention is given both to the technical side of the problems and the relationship side of problems. Sometimes there could be issue related to internal interaction or internal human capital issues, and these would be important to address as well. Because it doesn't matter how great your solution is, if internally the people issue will prevent your solution from being implemented, then all effort have put to generate such solutions simply will become wasted, right? And there are also effective goals that consultants need to be aware of. First, feelings, right? How does the managers and subordinate and their supervisor feel about the solution you provided, and how do they feel about the interaction you have generated through the consulting project? Those will further determine whether you will be able to gain their support or not. Another important effective aspect is trust, right? So if they do not trust your expertise, that very unlikely they will believe in the solution or recommendation you have provided. So that's why it's important to demonstrate your expertise and also demonstrate you understand the situation and use appropriate data to analyze and come up with a good recommendation to solve these problems. Another important effective goal is to ensure the desires and wants of not only the consultant, but most importantly, also equally important, the client's desire will be satisfied. So that way both parties will be benefit from such relationship, right? So the important takeaway from this slide is that both cognitive goal and affective goal will be important consideration when consultant work within the organizations. And next, we're going to quickly talk about how the typical process of clients' involvement. We sort of discussed this in the lecture about McKinsey's engagement, the approach, the two different approaches or frameworks that had been well implemented in McKinsey. Here, I'm just going to highlight a similar process that was delineated in the textbook. So in this, I'm only going to elaborate the first 4 steps, given that those are fairly important. The remaining steps in the description of the textbook is fairly straightforward, and also the remaining steps will also be covered in greater detail in later slides. So I'm not going to elaborate that much there. So first step is to define the initial problem, right? Whenever you engage such consulting project or start this consultant client relationship, you need to understand the goal of this project. The typical technique would be fairly straightforward. Basically, you ask the client what the problem is. Once they have expressed or highlight these problematic issues, what you want to do is to restate and while highlighting the underlying mechanism or potential underlying factors that could influence or cause these problems, and then wait for client's response. So we have also talked about this in the contract and entry stage lectures. So be sure to take a closer look there as well. Then the next step is to decide whether to proceed with the project or not. Except for this class, of course, because you are taking this business consulting course, you have to get involved with this to help address real world problems. But if you do have your own practice or join, whether it's doing external consulting or internal consulting, oftentimes you have the opportunity to determine how to proceed with the project or whether you want to take this project or not, right? So basically, what you are doing here is to determine the probability of success of this case and then figure out whether and how to proceed. So what people usually would do is to do a quick feasibility analysis to figure out whether they have resource available. These resource can be financial resource, human resource, and or even operational resource that will allow them to design, plan, and execute such project. If not, then the best solution would be simply not proceed with this project. Otherwise, you are going to fail, right? Then the third step is to select the dimension to be studied. So basically, the objective for this step is to identify key aspect of the problem and how and that should be analyzed. And what two common technique would be you simply can ask for client feedbacks, ask them to identify the key aspect or key factor that will be important antecedents or cause of these problem areas. Alternatively, what you can do is develop the issue tree that we have discussed in lecture 2 by looking at various factors that will cause the potential issues. You may be able to get a better insight on what dimension or what type of data you should gather. And fourth one is to decide who will be involved with this project. Basically, you want to establish a collaborative consultant and client team. This will help you to better gather insider information and get a sense of how to gather unique information and whether your recommended solutions make sense or not. So doing so that simply means that not only you need to see whether the partners, whether the individual in the consultant client teams have the right knowledge, skills, and abilities, and furthermore, whether they have sufficient powers for you to gather information or even conduct certain research methodology in the client's organization, right? So these are important things to consider. And the remaining staging the client's involvement is fairly straightforward. And so please take a quick look at the uh, textbook. I'm not going to elaborate much on those. And also this week will be important. So be sure I'm going in the discussion section. I will encourage you to use various tools that's accompanying with this textbook to help you to better prepare the contract and entry process, right? And that's it for today's lecture. Thanks so much.